Hold on, Mama. I won't let you die. Jessica's voice cracked as she said it, but her feet did not stop moving. Her arms were shaking. Her back felt like it would snap. Sweat poured down her face and mixed with dust. Madame Hannah's body lay heavy in her arms, too still, too cold, too quiet, like life was already slipping away. Jessica tightened her grip and staggered forward again. A car sped past, another one. A yellow bus splashed muddy water near her legs. Nobody slowed down. Nobody stopped. Jessica turned her head and screamed, "Please, help us, she's dying." But the road did not answer. Only engines, only horns, only people looking away like they did not hear a thing. Madame Hannah's eyes fluttered open for half a second, just a half second, and her lips moved like she was trying to speak. A faint sound came out, so weak it was almost swallowed by the noise of the street. "Help," Madame Hannah whispered. Then her head fell against Jessica's shoulder again. Jessica panicked. "No, no, no, Mama, stay with me," she cried. "Look at me, look at me." Her legs wobbled. She almost fell. A sharp pain shot through her arms, and for a moment she thought she could not carry Madame Hannah anymore. But when Jessica looked down at the old woman's face, dirty, bruised, and wet with tears, something inside Jessica hardened like stone. Jessica had seen people suffer before. She had suffered herself. She knew what it meant when the world decided you were not important enough to save. And she refused to let that happen again. Not today. She forced one foot in front of the other, even though her sandals were torn and her knees felt weak. The small clinic was not far, but it felt like it was on the other side of the world. Jessica shouted again, waving her free hand at every car. "Please, stop, just stop, help us." A taxi slowed, then sped off. A bike rider looked at her, hissed, and drove away. A woman selling oranges stared for 2 seconds, then turned back to her tray like nothing was happening. Jessica's throat burned. Tears rushed into her eyes, but she blinked them away so she could see the road. "Hold on, Mama," she whispered again, almost begging. "I'm here. I'm not leaving you." And then it happened. Madame Hannah's body suddenly jerked in Jessica's arms, like a final fight. Her lips opened, her eyes rolled. Jessica felt her breathing stop. Time froze. Jessica's heart almost stopped too. "No!" she screamed. She rushed forward in a desperate run, even though she was carrying a full-grown person. Her steps turned wild and uneven, her head spun, her vision blurred. The clinic gate finally came into view, small, rusty, and half open. Jessica ran straight inside and screamed like she had never screamed in her life. "Help! Please help! She's dying!" A nurse rushed out. Then another. A man in a white coat appeared. Young, tired eyes, but he moved fast. They pulled Madame Hannah from Jessica's arms and laid her on a stretcher. Jessica's arms instantly felt empty and useless. She almost fell forward. The nurse caught her. "Sister, sit down, sit down." Jessica did not sit. "Please," Jessica begged, grabbing the doctor's sleeve. "Please save her." She was on the road. She was begging. Nobody helped her. "Please don't let her die." The doctor looked at Jessica's face for 1 second. Really looked, and something changed in his eyes. "Okay," he said firmly. "Okay, we will try." They rolled Madame Hannah inside. The door slammed. Jessica was left outside, alone. Her chest rose and fell like she had been running for hours, which she had. Her whole body trembled like a leaf. She tried to breathe, but fear sat heavy inside her, like a rock. She looked down at herself. Her ash-colored gown was tattered and stained with mud. Her hair was uncombed and scattered around her face. Her arms had red marks from carrying Madame Hannah. Her legs were shaking so badly that she finally dropped onto the cold bench near the clinic wall. And that was when the tears came, not small tears. Big, painful tears. Jessica covered her mouth so she would not scream again. She had no mother, no father, no family to call. She was an orphan, and she was used to being alone. But for some reason, this old woman on the road, this woman she did not even know, had felt like someone she could not lose. Jessica pressed her forehead to her knees, whispering again and again, "Please, God, please, don't let her die, please." That morning had started like every other morning in Jessica's life, hard. She woke up before the sun on a thin foam mattress in a small, cramped room behind a tailor's shop in Lagos. The room smelled like old cloth and damp walls. A single bucket sat in the corner. Her school bag leaned against the wall, worn out and tired, just like her. Jessica washed her face with cold water and stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her eyes looked bigger than her face, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was always hungry, always worried, always thinking. She was a university student trying to finish school without help. No rich uncle, no aunt in America, no sponsor. Just her own strength. She sold snacks after lectures. She ran errands for people. She cleaned offices when she could get the job. Sometimes she skipped meals for 2 days, just so she could pay for handouts and transport. That morning, she had counted her money. Not enough. Her school fees deadline was close, and she was afraid. She tried to push the fear away as she walked down the street, heading toward the bus stop. She told herself what she always told herself. Jessica, just hold on. Just keep moving. And as she walked, she saw the usual Lagos life around her. People rushing, cars honking, traders shouting, everyone busy, everyone focused on their own struggle. Then Jessica heard something, soft, weak, almost hidden. Please, help me. Jessica stopped. She turned slowly. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Then she heard it again, closer. Help. Jessica followed the sound and saw her, an old woman lying near the edge of the road, half in the gutter, half on the sand. Her white lace clothes were stained with mud. Her grey hair was rough and scattered. There were bruises on her arms, her lips were dry and cracked, and her eyes were open but barely, they were begging. Jessica's breath caught. People passed the woman like she was trash. A man stepped around her without looking down. A woman raised her wrapper and walked past quickly, like she was scared suffering could rub off on her. Jessica stood there frozen. Her first thought was fear. What if this is a trap? Her second thought was survival. I'm late. I have to go. I have my own problems. But then the old woman's lips moved again. Please, my daughter, help. The woman's voice was so weak, it sounded like a dying bird. Jessica's heart squeezed painfully. She looked around. Please, somebody help her. Nobody answered. A bus conductor shouted, Move, move. A driver yelled, Madam, shift, you won't die. Jessica's hands clenched into fists. She could not understand it. How could people be that cold? The old woman's head fell to the side. Her eyes started closing. Jessica panicked and rushed forward. She bent down. Mama, Mama, can you hear me? The old woman's eyes fluttered. She tried to lift her hand, but it dropped. That was it. Jessica made a decision, not with her head, with her heart. She slid one arm under the woman's back and the other under her knees, and she lifted. The woman was heavier than she looked. Jessica nearly collapsed. Her whole body screamed, Drop her, you can't do this. But Jessica gritted her teeth and lifted again. I've got you, she whispered, tears forming. Hold on. And then she carried her, right there on that busy road, in the middle of a city that did not care. She started calling taxis. Please, help me, I'll pay. None stopped. Some stared and drove past. One slowed and said, Madam, I beg. Then he sped off. Jessica wanted to scream. Instead, she held Madam Hannah tighter and started walking, step by step, stagger by stagger. That was how she reached the clinic. That was how we returned to now. Jessica on a bench outside the emergency room, her body shaking, her eyes swollen with tears. Minutes passed like hours. Jessica stared at the closed door like her eyes could force it open. She prayed silently. She remembered the woman's faint voice. She remembered her begging. She remembered everyone ignoring her. And Jessica felt anger rising, hot and bitter, because it was not fair. Not fair that a human being could lie on the road and beg to live, and nobody would help. Then the door opened. The doctor stepped out. Jessica jumped up so fast her knees almost gave way. Doctor, she cried, is she okay? The doctor's face was serious. He removed his gloves slowly. Jessica's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear. The doctor took a breath and said, "We stabilized her, but she's very weak." Jessica's eyes widened. "So she will live." The doctor hesitated. That hesitation felt like a knife. "We're doing our best," he said carefully, "but we need to monitor her overnight. Her body has been through a lot." Jessica pressed her hands together. "Please, please, just let her live." The doctor studied Jessica's face. Then he said, "Are you her daughter?" Jessica froze. For a second, she wanted to say yes. Because it would be easier, because people treated you better when they thought you belonged to someone. But Jessica shook her head. "No, I just found her." The doctor looked surprised. "You found her and brought her here? Alone?" Jessica nodded, shame and pride mixing inside her. The doctor's eyes softened. "You did a good thing." Jessica's throat tightened. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. Briefly. They led Jessica inside. Madame Hannah lay on a bed, connected to a drip. Her face looked calmer, but still pale and bruised. Jessica stood beside her, and suddenly all the strength she had been using to survive broke apart. She began to cry again, quietly this time. "I'm sorry," Jessica whispered to the sleeping woman. "I'm sorry nobody helped you sooner." Jessica sat in the chair beside the bed. She did not leave. Even when the nurse told her visiting hours were over, Jessica begged and stayed all night. Her eyes stayed on Madame Hannah's chest, watching every small rise and fall, because Jessica was terrified that if she looked away, Madame Hannah would stop breathing again. Morning came, soft sunlight entered the room. Jessica had not slept. Her head was heavy, but she forced her eyes open when she felt movement. A faint sound, a small breath. Jessica looked up. Madame Hannah's eyes were open, not fully bright, but open. Jessica stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "Mama?" Jessica whispered. "Can you hear me?" Madame Hannah's eyes turned slowly toward her. She stared at Jessica's face, like she was trying to remember something important. Jessica wiped her tears quickly. "You're awake. Thank God. Thank God." Madame Hannah's lips moved. Her voice was weak but clear enough. "You—" Jessica froze. Madame Hannah lifted her hand slowly, shaking, and reached for Jessica's hand. Jessica grabbed it with both of hers. Madame Hannah swallowed, then whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Jessica broke down again, crying harder than before. But Madame Hannah did not release her hand. Instead, she held it tighter, and her eyes suddenly sharpened with a strange fear. Then she whispered something that made Jessica's whole body go cold. "They kidnapped me." Jessica's tears stopped. Her mouth fell open. Madame Hannah's fingers trembled around Jessica's hand as she added in a haunted voice, "And they are still looking for me." Jessica's heart slammed hard against her chest. "They kidnapped me." Those words echoed in her head like thunder. Jessica tightened her grip on Madame Hannah's hand, afraid that if she loosened it, the old woman might slip away again, either into unconsciousness or into fear. "Kidnapped?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely louder than breath. "Mama, what do you mean?" Madame Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind. These were quiet tears, deep, painful tears that had waited too long to fall. "They beat me," Madame Hannah said slowly. "They tied my hands. They covered my face. They kept me in a dark place." Jessica's stomach twisted. She glanced toward the door, suddenly scared. The clinic room felt smaller, the walls felt thinner. "Please don't talk too much," Jessica said gently. "You're still weak." Madame Hannah shook her head slightly. "I must talk. I don't know how long I have before they come back." Jessica's eyes widened. "Come back?" Madame Hannah swallowed. "They dumped me on the road when they thought I was dead. But men like that, they don't stop easily." Fear crawled up Jessica's spine. All her life, danger had been simple. Hunger, eviction, unpaid fees. This was different. This was dark. This was big. "Who would do this to you?" Jessica asked. Madame Hannah turned her face toward the window. Sunlight touched her bruised cheek, and for the first time Jessica really looked at her. This woman did not look poor. Even in pain, even in hospital clothes, there was something about her. Her posture, her calm strength, the way she spoke, that felt powerful. Madame Hannah closed her eyes. Someone who wants my seat. Jessica frowned. Seat? My company, Madame Hannah replied softly. My life. Jessica's breath caught. Company? Life? Before she could ask more, the nurse entered the room. Good morning, the nurse said kindly. She should rest now. Madame Hannah nodded, but her eyes stayed on Jessica. Don't leave, she whispered. Jessica shook her head quickly. I won't, I promise. The nurse smiled at Jessica. You must be very important to her. Jessica forced a small smile. I just helped. The nurse left. Silence filled the room again. Jessica sat down slowly, still holding Madame Hannah's hand. Her mind was racing. Who was this woman? What kind of life did she live that people would kidnap her? Why did they dump her instead of finishing the job? And why did fate place Jessica on that road at that exact moment? Madame Hannah slept again, but Jessica could not. She watched the door, she watched the window, she watched every shadow. Hours passed. Jessica did not move. A doctor came in to check Madame Hannah's pulse. A cleaner swept the floor. Nurses whispered outside. Jessica stayed. No one asked her to leave again. At some point, hunger hit her like a wave. Her stomach growled loudly, and she pressed her hand against it, embarrassed. She had not eaten since the night before, but she did not stand up. She could not leave Madame Hannah alone, not after what she had said. When Madame Hannah woke again, her eyes went straight to Jessica. You're still here, Madame Hannah said weakly. Jessica nodded. I told you I wouldn't leave. Madame Hannah studied Jessica's face carefully, like she was reading a story written on it. You look young, Madame Hannah said. Jessica smiled sadly. I am. What's your name? Jessica. Madame Hannah nodded slowly. Jessica? Thank you. Jessica felt tears sting her eyes again. You don't have to thank me, she said quickly. Anyone would have helped. Madame Hannah gave a small, tired smile. No, my dear. They didn't. Jessica looked away. Madame Hannah's fingers tightened around hers. Why did you stop? Jessica swallowed. Because you were begging. Madame Hannah's breath caught. And because, Jessica continued, voice shaking, I know what it feels like to beg and be ignored. Madame Hannah's eyes softened. Tell me about you, Madame Hannah said. Jessica hesitated. She had never been asked that before, not by someone who truly wanted to listen. I'm an orphan, Jessica said quietly. My parents died when I was small. I grew up moving from place to place. I'm in university now, but it's hard. I do small jobs. I manage. Madame Hannah listened without interrupting. You carried me with all your strength, Madame Hannah said slowly, even when no one helped you. Jessica shrugged. I didn't think. I just moved. Madame Hannah nodded. That is rare. Jessica looked up. Mama, who are you? Madame Hannah was silent for a long moment. Then she said, I am Madame Hannah Okori. The name hit Jessica like a slap. Her mouth opened slightly. Madame Hannah Okori, the billionaire CEO, owner of one of the biggest manufacturing companies in Nigeria. A woman whose face appeared on television, business magazines, and billboards. Jessica's head spun. No, she whispered. That's not possible. Madame Hannah gave a weak smile. It is. Jessica stood up so fast, her chair fell backward. Her hands flew to her mouth. I've seen you, Jessica stammered, on TV, on posters. You're a billionaire, Madame Hannah finished calmly. Jessica's legs felt weak. She slowly sank back into the chair. All the pieces clicked into place. The confidence, the danger, the kidnapping. Jessica started shaking, not from fear this time, but from shock. I carried a billionaire, she whispered. Madame Hannah squeezed her hand gently. You carried a human being. Jessica burst into tears. Not because of money, but because fate had chosen her, poor, struggling Jessica, to save someone this powerful. Later that afternoon, Madame Hannah asked for a phone. I need to make a call, she said. Jessica hesitated. Is it safe? Madame Hannah nodded. My driver, he's loyal. The call was short. Madame Hannah spoke quietly, giving directions. Jessica's heart beat fast. Less than 30 minutes later, the sound came. Engines, not one, not two, many. Jessica stood up and peeped through the window. Her breath caught. Black SUVs filled the clinic compound. Men in dark suits stepped out. They looked alert, sharp, serious. One of them spoke into a walkie-talkie. Jessica's hands trembled. The clinic door opened and a tall man rushed in. "Madam," he cried, rushing toward the bed. Madam Hannah lifted her hand. "I'm here." The man fell to his knees. "I thought we lost you," he said, voice breaking. Jessica stared. This was real. Very real. Madam Hannah turned to Jessica. "Jessica, this is my driver. And my security." The man turned to Jessica and bowed his head slightly. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for saving our madam." Jessica did not know where to look. Doctors gathered, nurses whispered. The clinic suddenly felt too small for the kind of people now standing inside it. Madam Hannah looked at Jessica. "Pack your things." Jessica blinked. "My things?" "You're coming with me," Madam Hannah said. Jessica froze. "Me?" "Yes," Madam Hannah said firmly. "I won't be safe without you." Jessica shook her head quickly. "Mama, I can't. I have school. I don't belong." Madam Hannah raised her hand gently. "Jessica, listen to me." Jessica stopped talking. "I lost my 2 children," Madam Hannah said softly. "A plane crash, 5 years ago." Jessica's heart dropped. "I have been alone since then," Madam Hannah continued. "I survived business battles, enemies, loss. But when I lay on that road, begging, and you carried me, I saw my daughter." Jessica's tears flowed freely. "I want to adopt you," Madam Hannah said. The room went silent. Jessica's head spun. "Adopt? Her? A poor orphan?" "I don't understand," Jessica whispered. Madam Hannah smiled gently. "You will." That night, Madam Hannah was moved to a private hospital, a guarded one. Jessica sat in a soft chair, staring at white walls and expensive curtains. This was not her world. She felt like she was dreaming, but fear still followed her. "What if they come again?" Jessica asked quietly. Madam Hannah looked serious. "They will try." Jessica's chest tightened. "I won't let them touch you," Madam Hannah added. Jessica nodded, but fear stayed. She could not forget Madam Hannah's earlier words. "They are still looking for me." Jessica did not sleep. She listened to every sound, every footstep, every whisper. Then, just before dawn, Madam Hannah spoke again. "There is something else," she said. Jessica leaned forward. "What is it?" Madam Hannah's face hardened. "I know who sent them." Jessica's breath caught. Madam Hannah's eyes burned with pain and anger. "My business rival," she said slowly. "Henry Ben." Jessica gasped. "What will you do?" she asked. Madam Hannah's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "I will fight." Jessica's heart pounded. She realized something then. Saving Madam Hannah had not just changed her life, it had dragged her into a war. And the war had only just begun. Madam Hannah closed her eyes again. Jessica sat beside her, holding her hand. Outside, the city slept peacefully, but danger was awake, and it was watching. The conference hall was alive. Bright lights hung from the ceiling like stars. Screens flashed graphs, numbers and world maps. Voices mixed together, deep, confident voices of men and women who spoke about money, power, and the future. Jessica stood beside Madam Hannah, holding a slim folder tightly to her chest. She wore a simple navy blue dress, neat and modest. Her hair was carefully packed. She looked clean, calm, and professional. But inside, her heart was racing. This was her first International Economic Summit. People walked past them, greeting Madam Hannah with smiles, handshakes, and respect. "Madam Hannah, it's an honor." "Welcome, Ma. Your survival inspired many of us." Madam Hannah nodded politely to each greeting, strong and composed. Jessica watched quietly. She still found it hard to believe that this powerful woman, this respected billionaire, was the same weak-old woman she had once carried on her back through a busy Lagos road. They took their seats near the front. Jessica opened her notebook, ready to write. That was when she felt it. A presence. She looked up. Across the aisle, a young man stood talking to a group of executives. He was tall, neatly dressed in a simple grey suit. Not flashy, not loud. His face was calm, his smile was gentle. There was something different about him. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was listening. Jessica found herself watching him longer than she meant to. Then, as if he felt her eyes on him, he turned. Their eyes met. For a second, the noise around them faded. He smiled, not the confident smile of a man showing off, but a warm one. A human one. Jessica felt her face heat up and quickly looked down at her notebook. Why am I suddenly shy, she thought. The summit began. Speeches followed one another. Madame Hannah spoke with confidence, her voice steady as she talked about growth, integrity, and resilience. Jessica wrote quickly, proud of her. During the break, Madame Hannah stood to greet some guests. Jessica, she said, come with me. Jessica followed. That was when the young man approached them. Good afternoon, Madame Hannah, he said politely. Madame Hannah looked at him and smiled. Good afternoon. I'm Benjamin, he said, offering a respectful handshake. Your speech was inspiring. Thank you, Madame Hannah replied warmly. This is my daughter and assistant, Jessica. Jessica's heart skipped. Daughter. Benjamin turned to Jessica and smiled again. Nice to meet you. Jessica swallowed. Nice to meet you too. There was a short silence, not an awkward one, a gentle one. I hope we can talk more later, Benjamin said. If you don't mind. Madame Hannah nodded. Of course. Benjamin excused himself and walked away. Jessica exhaled slowly. Madame Hannah glanced at her. You're smiling. Jessica blinked. Am I? Madame Hannah chuckled softly. Later that evening, there was a small networking dinner. Jessica found herself sitting across from Benjamin. They talked. About school, about work, about life. Benjamin spoke simply, without pride. He talked about his passion for development, for fairness, for building things that mattered. I believe success means nothing if it doesn't help people, he said. Jessica nodded slowly. I believe that too. Their eyes met again, something warm settled between them. By the end of the night, Jessica realized something that scared her. She liked him. A lot. Over the next few weeks, Benjamin stayed in touch. They talked on the phone. They met for coffee. With Madame Hannah's knowledge, Benjamin was kind, respectful, patient. He never asked for money, never bragged, never rushed her. Jessica felt safe around him. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine a future with someone. Madame Hannah noticed the change. You're happier, she said one afternoon. Jessica hesitated. Mama, I met someone. Madame Hannah smiled gently. I know. Jessica looked surprised. You do? Madame Hannah nodded. I've watched you. Tell me about him. Jessica told her everything. Madame Hannah listened quietly. He sounds like a good man, Madame Hannah said. Jessica's face brightened. You think so? Madame Hannah smiled. I do. Relief washed over Jessica. One evening, Benjamin came to dinner. The atmosphere was calm. Laughter filled the dining room. Benjamin spoke respectfully, answering Madame Hannah's questions honestly. Then Madame Hannah asked casually, Your surname? Benjamin smiled. Ben. The fork slipped from Madame Hannah's hand. The sound echoed loudly in the room. Jessica froze. Benjamin looked confused. Ma? Madame Hannah's face drained of color. Ben, she repeated slowly. Yes, Benjamin said gently. Benjamin Ben. Silence, heavy, dangerous. Madame Hannah stood up abruptly. Leave, she said. Jessica jumped to her feet. Mama? Madame Hannah's eyes burned. I said leave. Benjamin stood slowly. Shock written all over his face. I don't understand. Now, Madame Hannah snapped. Benjamin looked at Jessica helplessly. I'll call you, he whispered. Then he left. The door closed. Madame Hannah turned to Jessica. Her voice trembled with rage and pain. Henry Ben is his father. Jessica's world shattered. No, she whispered, that's not possible. Madame Hannah's eyes filled with tears. It is. Jessica shook her head wildly. Benjamin is kind. He's nothing like— Enough, Madame Hannah shouted. Jessica had never seen her like this. He is the son of the man who tried to kill me, Madame Hannah said coldly, and I will never accept him. Jessica's chest felt tight. Mama, please. Madame Hannah pointed toward the door. Choose. Jessica froze. Choose between me, Madame Hannah said, and him. Jessica's knees weakened, her heart split in two. That night, Jessica locked herself in her room. She cried until her eyes burned. How could love hurt so much? How could a name destroy everything? Her phone vibrated, a message from Benjamin. "I had no idea. Please believe me." Jessica pressed the phone to her chest. Downstairs, Madame Hannah sat alone, staring at an old photo of her lost children. Outside, the night was silent. Inside the house, two hearts were breaking. And Jessica knew one thing for sure. Whatever choice she made next, someone she loved would be hurt forever. Jessica did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the wall as if answers were written there. Her phone lay beside her, silent now, Benjamin's last message still glowing in her mind. "I had no idea, please believe me." She believed him. That was the problem. Downstairs, Madame Hannah was also awake. She sat in the quiet living room, the lights dimmed, an old photo frame resting on her lap. In the picture were two smiling young adults, a boy and a girl, her children, the ones she had lost in the plane crash years ago. Her fingers trembled as she touched the glass. "I buried you both," she whispered. "I won't bury another piece of my heart." Morning came slowly. Jessica heard a soft knock. "Come in," she said. Madame Hannah entered, her face calm but tired. "Sit," she said. Jessica obeyed. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Madame Hannah spoke. "You must choose." Jessica's chest tightened. "Mama," she said carefully, "please listen to me." Madame Hannah nodded once. "Benjamin is not his father," Jessica said. "He did not know. He did not plan it. He did not hurt you." Madame Hannah's eyes hardened. "Blood matters." Jessica shook her head. "Character matters more." Madame Hannah stood up abruptly. "That man destroyed my life." "And you destroyed his power," Jessica replied softly. "You survived. You won." Madame Hannah stopped walking. Jessica continued, tears forming. "You taught me to fight with truth, not hate. Please don't ask me to hate the wrong person." Madame Hannah turned slowly. "You love him?" she said. Jessica nodded. "I do." Silence filled the room again. Then Madame Hannah said something that shocked Jessica. "I forbid this relationship." Jessica's breath caught. "And if you continue," Madame Hannah added, voice breaking, "you will leave this house." Jessica felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She stood up slowly. "I love you," Jessica said, tears rolling freely. "You saved my life. You gave me a home, but I cannot kill my heart." Madame Hannah's lips trembled. Jessica bowed her head. "If leaving is the price, I will pay it." Madame Hannah turned away. "Go," she said quietly. Jessica packed her things that same day. Not the clothes, not the jewelry, only her documents, her school papers, her memories. As she stepped out of the mansion gates, the same gates that once opened to welcome her into a dream, Jessica felt like her heart was being torn apart. But she kept walking. Jessica moved into a small apartment near her university. Benjamin met her there. When he saw her, he did not speak. He pulled her into a tight hug. They cried together. "I never wanted this," Benjamin said. "I swear." "I know," Jessica replied. Weeks passed. Jessica returned to school. Benjamin stood by her. They lived simply. But Madame Hannah did not call, did not visit, did not answer messages. Jessica felt the loss deeply. She missed her mother, her protector, her savior. Benjamin noticed. "She will come around," he said gently. Jessica was not sure. One afternoon, Madame Hannah received a visitor, an elderly man with calm eyes and a walking stick. Her uncle, Johnson. He sat across from her and listened quietly as she poured out her anger, her pain, her fear. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You are right to be angry," he said, "but you are wrong to punish love." Madame Hannah frowned. "He is Henry Ben's son." Johnson leaned forward. "And you are not your enemy's mistakes." Madame Hannah's breath caught. "You were spared on that road for a reason," Johnson continued, "not just to survive, but to heal." Madame Hannah looked away. "Jessica carried you when the world walked past," Johnson said. "Do not become the world that walked past her." Those words struck deep. That night, Madame Hannah did something she had not done in months. She opened the letters, Henry Benn's letters from prison. She read them slowly. His apologies were not proud. They were broken. He admitted everything. He begged. He accepted blame. Madame Hannah cried. For the first time since the kidnapping, her anger softened. Madame Hannah made a decision. She withdrew the case. Henry Benn was released after 5 years in prison. When he stood before her, thin and humbled, he fell to his knees. "I am sorry," he said, tears streaming. "I destroyed everything." Madame Hannah looked at him for a long time. Then she spoke. "You destroyed much, but not everything." She turned away. That same day, she went to see Jessica. When Jessica opened the door and saw her, she froze. "Mama," Madame Hannah pulled her into a hug. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should not have asked you to choose." Jessica sobbed into her shoulder. "I forgive you," she said. Madame Hannah pulled back and looked at Benjamin. "Take care of her," she said firmly. Benjamin bowed his head. "With my life." 2 months later, the wedding was announced. Simple, beautiful, full of meaning. Jessica walked down the aisle in white, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Benjamin waited for her, calm and steady. Madame Hannah stood beside Henry Benn. 2 former enemies, 2 wounded souls, together. They walked the couple down the aisle. People whispered in disbelief, but love stood taller than shame. When the vows were said, Madame Hannah smiled through tears. She had found her daughter again. 2 years later, laughter filled the same mansion that once echoed with fear. Jessica held a baby boy in her arms. Benjamin stood beside her, smiling proudly. Madame Hannah approached, her eyes glowing. "What is his name?" she asked. "Jude," Jessica said softly. Madame Hannah held her grandson and whispered, "Life." Jessica looked at her adopted mother, at her husband, at her child. She remembered the road, the dust, the weight in her arms, and the words she had spoken that changed everything. "Hold on, Mama, I won't let you die." She smiled. Because sometimes, when you refuse to let someone die, love lives instead. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.